When it comes to Steins Gate Zero, this is a series that should only be watched by those who have completed the first anime, and obviously because of that I will be covering spoilers from the first anime and Zero as well, since the first series does inform the viewer of what happens in Zero to a certain degree. Steins Gate Zero is the worst world line that Okabe must live through, the beta world line, the one where World War III happens and the mad scientist becomes a sad scientist. But despite being the worst world line, it's also the most important, as without it, the Okabe and the Alpha world line, aka the first Steins Gate, can never reach the Holy Land where everyone gets a happily ever after. In order for Okabe to succeed, he first had to fail once in order for there to be a future where Steins Gate Zero's Okabe was created. This is the second half to the Steins Gate story you never knew you actually needed. When it comes to making any form of sequel-esque series, it's challenging, as what needs to happen is you need to retain what the fans enjoyed from the first series, while also doing something new and interesting so it never feels like a rehash of what was successful before. Basically avoiding the cries from the fandom saying you're milking the series dry. Surprisingly, Steins Gate Zero hits most of the notes needed in order for it to feel important, nostalgic, but also fresh. Which isn't totally surprising, since in the first anime, the Beta World line, Okabe sends a message to the Alpha World line, so the groundwork for this series was implemented before Zero was ever crafted. So it helps sell this one as a needed entry despite most fans never actually asking for it, but secretly wanting it, as this midquel series is phenomenal and shows the other half of the story we never actually got to see. Steins Gate to me has always been a character drama. The emotional weight of many scenes would almost always grip you because the writing for its characters was top notch. Even template tropey characters were fun to follow, meaning nearly every episode in the show was typically needed to some degree. When episodes tried to be sad, they generally were, because it never felt like cheap tricks just trying to make the viewer feel something randomly, but rather when bad things happened we felt horrible because we had come to know and love this large cast of characters and felt very close to them. Zero mirrors this design choice fairly closely, but ends up being a bit more disheartening just due to how this world's Okabe is presented, and it's a wonderful design choice. Zero's Okabe is a husk of his former self. Unlike in the first series where he tries again and again after a failed attempt at saving Kurisu or Mayuri, this Okabe, he never did that, and settled on the Beta World line where Kurisu dies and Mayuri gets to live. For a large chunk of this anime, Okabe is never the mad scientist. He acts seemingly normal, lives a boring adult life while growing further and further away from his old group of friends. What I believe Zero did well is make Okabe the exact opposite to who he was in the first anime. By doing this, Zero naturally feels different from its counterpart anime, letting this series blossom into something new and refreshing, while also feeling familiar because of the old and newer characters that retain that familiar Steins Gate charm. One of the new additions, Maho, meshes with the group right away and feels like someone who naturally would join the group of delusional scientists. Old favorites like Daru and Mayuri keep up with what they do best, but also excelling far past where most would expect them to go. But Okabe never feels like Okabe, but rather the saddest man alive pretending to be happy with what he sees around him. Due to our knowledge of the first series, we fully understand why Okabe is the way he is, what he suffered through, what he lost, the amount of times he witnessed Mayuri get killed time after time, and how many times he personally failed just to settle for one friend dying so another could live. If Okabe would have been the mad scientist early in Zero, then it would have felt like fan service, one of those sequels just designed to give the fans their favorite moments in a new anime that's really just the same old one with a new coat of paint. Instead, Zero designed this version of Okabe as a husk of his former self, and over 23 episodes carefully rebuilt his character into who he once was with a mission to achieve his goal, Steins Gate. An impossible task, even more so for a man stuck in a world line where World War III is set to happen no matter what. With Kurisu long dead, this dreadful world surrounded by despair no matter which way you look at it lets this world line become the most dreadful but optimistic all at the same time. Because most viewers will have watched the first Steins Gate, we know that this Okabe will end up sending a message to the one in the first series, and he will reach Steins Gate. He will overcome his mental barriers and reach deep down inside and overcome his depression, but we know it will take a long time to get there. Knowing the ending to Zero to a certain degree actually benefits the series greatly. You know Zero's Okabe will succeed in helping his other self in reaching Steins Gate, the world line where World War III doesn't exist and Mayuri and Kurisu both live. But in order for this world to exist, Zeros must fail, but also succeed all at the same time. Of course, you don't know all the details, how he sends this message to his past self, what ends up happening to this Worldline and all its characters, but even if this world ceases to exist, they end up succeeding in another Worldline. Sure, the unique experiences of the beta won't be around in the Steins Worldline, but that's what makes time travel stories so mesmerizing. Even when things are sad, they never are truly lost as they continue to exist in other realities. The number of time aspects in Zero's story mirrored that of the first anime, but remained to be new and interesting, constantly took me by surprise. Like how in episode 21, Okabe is challenging himself to find a way back to 2011, and the amount of times he has to suffer repeating a near identical event mirrored that of him reliving Mayuri's fixed death from the first series. Unlike in that moment, this Okabe really didn't suffer. Instead, he was a man with a mission and wasn't letting anything get him down. Zero knows what fans enjoyed from the first series, but it isn't afraid to play around with the formula by spicing up relationships, at times ruining friendships, or most noticeably with Okabe, removing the aspect that made him so lovable and turning him into a completely different person. By doing this, Zero stands tall by itself as a unique story, but also one essential to that of the first anime. Characters like Daru shine even brighter than they ever did, especially with Kuretsu long gone. It ends up being Daru and Maho who must develop the crucial time-traveling tech needed to fix this future. Daru in his emotional range shine the most when he has to smack some sense into Okabe for either ignoring others' feelings, or he has just had enough of the man who's okay with everything going to shit, while he and the others work their asses off for a better tomorrow. Maho easily could have been a replacement Kuretsu, but actually ended up being a unique character with a gripping connection to her. The colleague who envied her ability but deeply loved her and how she deals with becoming her own person while feeling held down as she can't live up to her legacy. It's easy to write those characters who are envious of their colleagues, and that's that. But having Maho be envious but also have her massively respect her late friend and aim to be like her helped sell this girl far better than I could have ever imagined. Mayuri was one of the biggest surprises this season, especially since she's a big reason in why this Okabe never tried again to save Kuretsu after a failed attempt, as she just wanted him to stop burdening himself. In Zero, the way her character slowly shatters over the course of the first half and where she heads in the second is some of the best content in the entire season. When she breaks down and Okabe has to deal with what he created, making her suffer for so long by lying to her and himself that he is happy with his current situation, that will make even the most emotionless people pretty damn sad. Though not every character is memorable in Zero, this is a large cast so some had to be pushed to the side, and Ruka and Ferris were pretty forgettable past a few episodes. Now Ruka did have a short and emotional plotline about feeling left out from the group, which was really wonderful and fairly well written, with why Okabe pushed Ruka to the side unlike the others, but for the most part both Ruka and Ferris felt like filler characters just there to give moral support or drinks to the characters actually doing something this season. I'm glad they were there as I do like them, but when you look at the grand picture, if you took them out of Zero, not much would actually change. But at least Ruka had something memorable this season. With how the antagonist and overall doom this season is portrayed, it was actually really well done. It's easy to figure out who will betray who, but it never felt like it needed to be a secret for us, but rather a secret for the characters. Who ends up betraying Okabe and company comes as a surprise to them, and their reactions are fantastic as they had zero reasons to ever doubt them. Of course, the viewer watching will know because we have the godlike perspective. For the most part, we know what everyone is thinking, and we get to see those foreshadowing shots that hint at possible betrayal. Not everything needs to be shocking for the viewer as long as the characters sell the reveals in a believable and intriguing way, which they certainly do. Now, the only real complaint I have when it comes to the antagonists of the season is the handful of action-driven sequences, and I find them quite bad. Steins isn't an action show, so when action becomes something more than a 1-minute part to an episode, it's easy to notice mistakes. Often when gunfights were present, it tried to make them seem exciting, but actually would end up just looking like a bunch of soldiers wildly firing while one person took out the rest in a pretty underwhelming and superhuman fashion. The action that worked well was when we were in the future and saw more tactical-based combat, or any scene with more or less a one-on-one fight that didn't try to overstay its welcome. Basically, when fights or action-driven sequences were more human and not supernatural, they ended up working fairly well, and when they tried to be a bit more complex, they often failed. Now, there isn't a lot of action in Zero, but there are episodes where action takes the driver's seat, and it's not that great. Steins Gate Zero is probably the best example on how to make a sequel important for the plot, do its own unique and interesting arcs while not trampling or changing anything from the first series. It remains to have many aspects that sold the average viewer on the idea of Steins Gate, rich cast of characters with distinct personality, emotionally heavy driven scenes, and timeline alterations that mess with the lead character's head, but does so in a brand new story with new and bigger threats that its story interweaves with that of the first series, but also remains separate all at the same time. It's wonderful, and what I was expecting out of the project I personally received, and then some. I wouldn't say this is better or worse than the first series, but rather it feels like an extra arc that came off the production line right after the first Steins Gate ended. It has a new feeling to it, but it doesn't feel like Steins Gate and Zero are two separate stories, but rather one large time travel series that when you watch the first, you immediately should watch Zero right after. In terms of bringing back a property with such a large following, this is probably the most respectable respectable take I've personally experienced in anime. Steins Gate just got better because of Zero, and the ending of the first series just means so much more because of Zero and what this world went through. For this review, I'm basing everything from the TV broadcast, and I do expect most of my issues will be polished up for the Blu-ray release, similar to the first series. Now overall, I'm pretty happy with how this anime looks more often than not. Right away, there's this gloomy atmosphere lurking around Okabe, and it's the way the series should be directed. The biggest issue comes from the amount of stagnant shots that lose a lot of polish and detail from the general facial animation to just basic background details. And I'm not talking about the in-between frames people like to clip and scream about poor animation. I'm talking about keyframes that look unfinished. In motion, the series generally looks polished enough to get the job done, but it's the typical issues you see with most anime that thankfully aren't a big enough problem to ruin an episode, but they are noticeable enough that you will probably take a second glance quite often. But like previously mentioned, all minor details that should and hopefully will be polished up in the physical release. Now some people have claimed that the directing isn't as exciting as the first series, and though technically that's correct, I disagree that this season's directing is lesser in quality because it doesn't mirror that of the first series, rather it's just different. The first Steins Gate was very much about time travel and warping Okabe's mind, and Zero a good chunk is seen through a broken man's eyes with less focus on time travel. But when time travel actually is present, it mirrors that of the first series quite well, shifting the overall art style to be a bit more abstract and wild, letting it feel like we're being sucked through a wormhole and are experiencing exactly what Okabe is feeling. But most of the time, it's just messed up situations Okabe and company go through, and more are down to earth more often than not. So a lot of the tragedy actually comes from character-based drama, so the directing always matches the scenes at hand quite well, just this anime had to handle most episodes in a different way than that of the first series, which is personally what I wanted. This isn't Steins Gate, it's Steins Gate Zero, a new story, a new mentality for our main character, and many side characters. It shouldn't feel like the same old anime. Most of the general designs are similar to that of the first series, but there are some slight alterations that do make this version stick out. Most noticeably is Okabe's facial design. Though being set around the same time as the first series, Okabe almost feels 10 years older with how sunken his face is, and how lifeless he normally looks. One of my favorite points in the anime is when we see Okabe's face get younger and younger as he goes back in time at one point in the anime. It's a small touch that may go unnoticed, but they increase the quality greatly because of this. Most dips that I experience with Zero are the typical inconsistencies you see with most anime airing over multiple seasons, that almost always get touched up if not fully corrected come media release time. As long as it doesn't fully ruin a scene, dips in art or animation quality won't bother me too much, and there was only a few points where I thought the dips were too extreme, so honestly, I'd say this looks just as good, if not better, in a few select episodes than that of the first series. Just the direction and atmosphere was completely fresh, so it might feel lesser in quality if you go in expecting it to look and feel exactly like the first Steins Gate. Now the dub for Steins Gate is one of my favorite of all time, and the dub for Zero is almost as perfect as the first anime. Daru shines even better in the English than he does in the Japanese, where often he can be pretty disturbing with how extreme his Japanese voice actor goes in on certain scenes. Though having watched this anime weekly with the Japanese cast, the characters that stuck out the most had to be Okabe, Maho, as well as Mayuri. Maho's voice sold the character the best out of the two dubs, really making you believe she was this intelligent woman, but also a little childish, like her appearance first indicates. Okabe's hopelessness that was nearly always present crushed your soul and usually made you feel depressed, and when it reached the point where the mad scientist had to return, goddamn did he sell those lines. But Mayuri's gut-punching and heartbreak when she confronts Okabe and breaks down is just too sad for the average viewer to handle. Seeing Mayuri sad is one of those things. Hearing her break down is absolutely soul-crushing. The Steins Gate OST has always been great, but the last third of this anime was a step above. There's so many moments that got chills up my spine because of the way the music was directed, at times being so loud and in your face as Okabe rushed towards his goal, or how it would eat away in the background of the scene at hand. Music helps sell most impactful scenes, and without it, it wouldn't have been nearly as memorable as they were. Of course, many iconic pieces from the first series are still present, but there was enough new tracks in the series to leave a lasting impression. Really, no matter how you watch this, English or Japanese dubs alike, it really does sell this as one of the all-time greats. Steins Gate Zero is one of those anime that if you enjoyed the first series, at the very least, you'll leave Zero entertained. For myself, this hit everything I needed out of it, and it truly concluded this world in every way that I would personally want. I've seen Okabe in the Alpha Worldline, I've seen him in the Beta, and I've seen him in Steins Gate. I feel like his story is perfectly wrapped up with this new and brilliant series. Though there are dips in production quality, and though you may find certain episodes to drag, this series did everything I believe it needed to, and I consider it to be the same quality of the first series, and it's why I award it the same rating, my ultimate seal of approval. For those who did check out this crazy series, what did you think of it? Let me know your thoughts down in that comment section below. Remember to leave a like if you did enjoy, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content from me in the future. As well, there's always my Patreon to directly fund the channel for as little as $1 a month if you so wish. But until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.